The crystalline spires of Velthara Prime pierced the violet sky like frozen lightning, their surfaces humming with the gentle vibration of advanced technology. For 3,000 years, this peaceful world had known nothing but harmony, until today. High Counselor Zephyron pressed her translucent fingers against the viewing portal of the emergency broadcast chamber. Her 4 eyes, each a different shade of azure, watched in terror as the Dark Fleet materialized in their star system like a spreading plague. "How many ships?" she whispered, her voice barely audible through the membrane that served as her mouth. 700 and counting, High Counselor, replied Technical Specialist Humara, his 6 arms dancing across holographic controls with desperate precision. "They're surrounding our entire solar system. We've never seen technology like this." The ships were wrong. That was the only way Zephyron could describe them. Where Velthari vessels were elegant curves of bio-grown metal that sang through space, these craft were jagged scars against the stars. They absorbed light rather than reflecting it, creating holes in the fabric of space itself. "Have they responded to our peaceful contact attempts?" Zephyron asked, though she already knew the answer from Humara's wilting posture. "They destroyed the first diplomatic vessel before it could even broadcast a greeting," Humara's voice cracked. "The pilot. There wasn't even time to scream." A low rumble shook the crystalline tower as one of the alien ships, impossibly massive like a mountain turned inside out, moved closer to their world. The very air seemed to recoil from its presence. "High Counselor," another technician called. Out, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "We're receiving a transmission from the lead vessel." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing something that made every Velthari in the room step back in instinctive horror. The being on the screen was a nightmare of chitinous black armor and burning red sensors. When it spoke, its voice was like grinding metal. "Inferior species of Velthara Prime. I am War Harvester Krexoth of the Devourer Syndicate. Your world has been selected for consumption. Your technology will be absorbed. Your people will be processed for biological resources. Resistance is not only futile, it is forbidden." The transmission cut off, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Zephyron felt her 4 hearts hammering against her chest cavity. The Velthari were a peaceful species. They had no military, no weapons beyond basic defensive shields. Their entire civilization was built on cooperation, art, and the gentle cultivation of their garden world. "How long until they reach the surface?" she asked. 12 standard hours, Humara replied, his voice hollow. "They're taking their time. They want us to know what's coming." Zephyron closed her eyes and tried to think. There had to be something, anything they could do. The Velthari were part of the Galactic Cooperation Council, but their nearest allies were weeks away at faster-than-light speed. Even if they sent a distress call immediately, it would be far too late. "Unless, Humara," she said suddenly, her voice gaining strength. "The emergency beacon system, the one that broadcasts to all frequencies across the galaxy simultaneously. Can we use it?" "Yes, but High Counselor, even if someone receives the signal, no one could reach us in time to do it anyway," Zephyron interrupted. "Send the call on all frequencies, all languages, maximum power. Include our star charts, our situation, everything. Maybe someone out there will surprise us." Humara hesitated for only a moment before his arms began flying across the controls. The massive communication array that crowned their tower began to glow with desperate energy. "Broadcasting now, High Counselor. The signal is propagating across the galaxy at quantum speeds. If anyone is listening." Another rumble shook the tower, stronger this time. Through the viewing portal, they could see smaller Devourer ships, breaking away from the main fleet, beginning their descent toward the planet's surface. Zephyron watched the countdown timer Humara had projected, 11 hours and 43 minutes until surface landing. She tried not to think about what processed for biological resources might mean. Far across the galaxy, in a small blue and green world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, a sleepy communications technician named Sarah Chen was wrapping up her night shift at the Deep Space Monitoring Station in Chile. She was about to grab her third coffee when every alarm in the facility began screaming at once. "What the hell?" Sarah bolted upright, spilling coffee across her keyboard. The massive radio telescope arrays outside were all turning in perfect synchronization, tracking something that was making her equipment register readings she'd never seen before. Her supervisor, Dr. Martinez, came running into the control room, still buttoning his shirt. "Chen, what's the situation?" "I don't know, sir. We're receiving a transmission on all frequencies simultaneously. That shouldn't be possible with our current understanding of physics." Dr. Martinez leaned over her shoulder as Sarah began isolating the signal. What they heard next changed everything. "This is High Counselor Zephyrion of Valthera Prime, broadcasting on all frequencies to any civilized species capable of receiving this transmission. We are under attack by a hostile force calling themselves the Devourer Syndicate. 700 ships have surrounded our solar system. We are a peaceful people with no military capabilities. They intend to harvest our world and process our population for biological resources. We have approximately 12 hours before surface invasion begins. Please, if anyone is listening, we need help." The transmission included star charts, technical data, and something that made Sarah's blood run cold: visual recordings of the Devourer ships destroying the Valthari diplomatic vessel without warning. Dr. Martinez was already reaching for the secure phone that connected directly to military command. "This is impossible. The signal's coming from 37 light-years away. Even at light speed, this transmission should have taken decades to reach us, but our equipment is showing it's real time." Sarah was running the star charts through the computer. "Sir, if these coordinates are accurate, and if we launched immediately with our fastest ships, we could reach them in approximately 18 hours. Dr. Martinez finished, his voice grim. 6 hours too late. "Sir," Sarah said quietly, "what if they're not the only ones who received this signal?" Across the globe, similar scenes were playing. Out in monitoring stations, amateur radio setups, and even car stereos that happened to be tuned to the right frequency. The Valthari distress call was reaching everyone everywhere. But most importantly, it was reaching the newly constructed Earth Defense Fleet. Admiral Jackson Roberts was in the middle of reviewing deployment schedules for humanity's first interstellar military vessels when his aide burst into his office without knocking. "Admiral, emergency transmission from Deep Space Monitoring. We have a confirmed alien distress call." Admiral Roberts, a weathered man who had commanded naval vessels for 30 years before transitioning to the new space fleet, looked up calmly. "Confirmed how?" "Multiple verification sources, sir. The signal is being received globally. The technology behind the transmission is beyond our current capabilities, but our xenolinguistics AI has already decoded the message. Sir, they're asking for help." Admiral Roberts read the decoded transmission twice before standing up. "Get me the President, then get me fleet status on all FTL-capable vessels." "Sir, our ships are fast, but the distance—" "How fast can we get there, Commander?" 14 hours, sir. If we push the engines past recommended limits, maybe 12. "Admiral." Roberts smiled grimly. "Then we'd better hurry." Back on Valthera Prime, Zephyrion watched the invasion countdown tick toward 0. Their distress call had been broadcasting for 6 hours with no response. The Devourer ships were now in the outer atmosphere, and the first ground-based harvesters were preparing to deploy. "High Counselor," Ara said softly. "Perhaps we should begin evacuation procedures to the deep caves." Zephyrion nodded sadly. It would only delay the inevitable, but at least some of her people might survive a few days longer. She was about to give the order when the communication array suddenly came alive with an incoming transmission. "Valthara Prime, this is Admiral Jackson Roberts of the Earth Defense Fleet. We received your distress call. Hang in there. Help is coming." The voice was strong, confident, and completely alien to Valthari ears, but it was the most beautiful sound Zephyrion had ever heard. Who are you?" she managed to transmit back. "We're humans, from a world called Earth. We're still 12 hours out, but I need you to listen carefully. Do you have any defensive capabilities at all? Anything that might slow down an invasion force?" "No," Zephyrion replied. her hope beginning to fade again. We are a peaceful species. We have never needed weapons. There was a pause, and when the human voice returned, it carried something that made Zephyron's skin tingle with an emotion she couldn't identify. Peaceful, huh? Well, that's about to change. I need you to do exactly as I say. You want us to what? Humara's 6 arms had stopped their usual graceful movement and were now trembling visibly. Zephyron repeated the human's instructions, still hardly believing them herself. Admiral Roberts says we need to make the Devourers angry enough to focus all their attention on the surface, but not angry enough to simply destroy the planet from orbit. High Counselor, with respect, this sounds like madness. How can beings we've never met possibly understand our situation well enough to— Because, interrupted a new voice over the communication system, we've been in similar situations before. The speaker identified herself as Dr. Elena Vasquez, apparently some kind of human military strategist. Her voice carried the same inexplicable confidence as the Admiral's. Counselor Zephyron, I need you to understand something about humans. We come from what the galaxy would probably classify as a death world. Most of our planet's surface is either too hot, too cold, too wet, too dry, or actively trying to kill us in creative ways. We've spent our entire evolutionary history learning how to fight things bigger, stronger, and nastier than us. Through the viewing portal, Zephyron could see the first Devourer landing craft touching down in the sacred groves outside the capital city. The ancient trees, some over 1,000 years old, were being crushed into pulp by the massive metal feet of the invaders' machines. Dr. Vasquez, Zephyron said, fighting to keep her voice steady. I appreciate your confidence, but there are 700 ships up there. How many do you have? 12. The silence that followed was deafening. 12 ships against 700, Humara whispered. The humans are coming here to die with us. But Dr. Vasquez's voice cut through their despair. Counselor, 12 human ships might not sound like much, but I need you to trust us. Your distress call didn't just reach us. It reached every human on Earth. Right now, there are 8 billion people watching this situation unfold. Politicians are making speeches. News anchors are crying on live television. Children are asking their parents why we're not helping the nice aliens fast enough. Zephyron didn't understand most of what the human was saying, but she could hear something fierce in the woman's voice. You see, Counselor, humans have a bit of a problem. We see someone getting bullied and we tend to take it personally, especially when that someone asked nicely for help. On the surface below, Zephyron watched in horror as Devourer harvester units began emerging from their landing craft. The beings were even more terrifying in person, 8 feet tall, covered in chitinous armor, moving with predatory grace as they began systematically destroying everything in sight. They're on the surface now, she reported. The harvesters they're destroying our cultural centers first. The art galleries, the music conservatories, the libraries. Classic intimidation tactic, came a third human voice, younger with an accent Zephyron couldn't place. This is Lieutenant Sarah Kim, tactical analysis. They want to break your spirit before they break your bodies. Standard psychological warfare. How do you know so much about this? Zephyron asked. Because we've seen this playbook before, Lieutenant Kim replied grimly. Usually when we're the ones using it. The communication was interrupted by a proximity alarm. Humara's arms danced over his controls as he processed the incoming data. High Counselor, something's happening to the Devourer fleet. On the holographic display, they watched in amazement as the 700 ships that had been methodically surrounding their planet suddenly began moving into a different formation. The massive vessels were pulling back from the surface and clustering together in high orbit. What are they doing? Zephyron asked. They're responding to our arrival. Admiral Roberts's voice crackled over the comm. Counselor, I need you to look toward your star's third moon. Tell me what you see. Zephyron directed the tower's sensors toward the small, barren moon that orbited Velthara Prime every 14 days. At first, she saw nothing unusual. Then the sensors detected 12 small objects moving at impossible speed toward their position. I see 12 small craft, she reported. They're moving very fast. That's us, Admiral Roberts said, and Zephyron could hear something like satisfaction in his voice. ETA 6 minutes. Now, Counselor, I need you to do something that's going to seem counterintuitive. I need you to broadcast a message to the Devourer fleet. What kind of message? Tell them that Earth has formally declared this world under human protection. Tell them they have one chance to withdraw peacefully. Humura's 4 eyes went wide. High Counselor, that will only make them angrier. They'll focus their entire fleet on destroying the humans. Exactly, said Dr. Vasquez. That's the point. Zephyron felt as though she was standing at the edge of a great precipice. Everything about this plan seemed insane. But what choice did they have? The Devourers were already on the surface and her people were dying. Very well, she said. Humara, open a channel to the Devourer command ship. The image of War Harvester Krexoth appeared again on their display. His burning red sensors somehow managing to convey irritation despite their artificial nature. Inferior species, you waste our time with pointless communications. Prepare for processing. War Harvester Krexoth, Zephyron said, her voice gaining strength with each word. I am here to inform you that the world of Velthera Prime is now under the protection of the species known as humans, from the world called Earth. You are ordered to withdraw your forces immediately. For a moment, Krexoth's image seemed to freeze. Then he began to make a sound that Zephyron eventually realized was laughter. Humans, we have no record of this species in our databases. You expect us to fear 12 primitive craft? Your desperation has made you foolish. Perhaps you should scan those 12 primitive craft more carefully, Zephyron suggested, surprised by her own boldness. She watched as Krexoth gestured to something off-screen. A moment later, his burning sensors seemed to dim slightly. Impossible. These energy readings. What are these humans? Why don't you ask them yourself, Zephyron said, and switched the communication to include the human fleet. Admiral Roberts' voice came through clear and calm. War Harvester Krexoth, this is Admiral Jackson Roberts of the Earth Defense Fleet. You have 60 seconds to begin withdrawing your forces from this system, or we will withdraw them for you. Krexoth's image twisted with what might have been rage. 60 seconds? You dare threaten the Devourer Syndicate with 12 ships? We will crush you like insects. 55 seconds, Admiral Roberts replied conversationally. Deploy all fighters, Krexoth snarled. Launch everything, I want those humans vaporized. The space around Velthera Prime suddenly erupted into chaos as hundreds of smaller craft poured out of the Devourer ships like angry insects. Each fighter was the size of a Valthari civilian transport, bristling with weapons that could reduce a city to ash. 40 seconds, Admiral Roberts said calmly. Zephyron watched the sensor display in growing horror as wave after wave of Devourer fighters screamed toward the 12 human ships. There had to be thousands of them. Admiral Roberts, she transmitted desperately. There are too many. You need to retreat, Counselor, came the Admiral's voice. And now she could hear something new in it, something that made her 4 hearts skip a beat. You really don't know much about humans, do you? The 12 human ships, which had been advancing in a tight formation, suddenly scattered like seeds in the wind. But instead of fleeing, they accelerated directly toward the oncoming swarm of Devourer fighters. What happened next would be talked about in the archives of Velthera Prime for the next 1,000 years. Chapter 3. The Human Way of War. First human ship to engage the Devourer fighters was the UES Relentless, commanded by Captain Maria Santos. As the massive swarm of enemy craft closed in, she opened a channel to her crew. All hands, this is the captain. I know what you're thinking, we're outnumbered about 100 to 1. But remember what we learned in the Sol defense simulations. These aren't humans we're fighting. From the command center on Velthera Prime, Zephyron watched in fascination and terror as the human ship dove directly into the heart of the Devourer formation. Instead of being overwhelmed, something impossible began to happen. The human ship moved like nothing she had ever seen. It twisted and spun through space with movements that should have liquefied any biological crew, turning the three-dimensional battlefield into a deadly dance. Energy weapons that should have connected missed by inches. Missiles that locked on found themselves chasing empty space as the ship seemed to predict their paths seconds before they were even fired. "How are they doing that?" Umara whispered, his 6 arms frozen over his controls. "Combat prediction algorithms," came Lieutenant Kim's voice over the comm. "Every human pilot trains against simulated alien combat styles. We've been preparing for this kind of fight for decades. But it wasn't just the movement that made Zephyr On's 4 hearts race. The weapons the humans brought to bear were unlike anything in Valthari databases, where most civilized species used precision energy weapons designed to disable rather than destroy. The humans seemed to have taken a different approach entirely. The UES Relentless fired something that looked like a simple projectile. When it struck the first Devourer fighter, the enemy craft didn't just explode. It came apart at the molecular level, creating a brief new star in the darkness of space. "What was that?" Zephyron asked. "Relativistic kinetic penetrator," Captain Santos replied matter-of-factly. "Basically, we throw things really, really hard." A second human ship, the UES Defiant, demonstrated a different approach. Instead of dodging through the enemy formation, it simply charged straight ahead, its hull glowing with some kind of energy field. Devourer weapons struck the field and scattered harmlessly. When the ship reached the center of a cluster of enemy fighters, it released what could only be described as controlled lightning. The electrical discharge arced between enemy ships, overloading their systems and sending dozens of fighters tumbling dead through space. "Electromagnetic pulse weapon," explained Dr. Vasquez. "We learned early on that most advanced technology doesn't like sudden power surges. But what truly amazed Zephyr On was the coordination. The 12 human ships moved as though they shared a single consciousness, creating overlapping fields of fire that turned the space around Valthara Prime into a death trap for anything not broadcasting human identification codes. On the surface of the planet, War Harvester Krexoth was receiving increasingly desperate reports from his fighter squadrons. "Command, this is Squadron Leader Vexhai. We've lost 30% of our fighters in the first engagement. These humans, they fight like demons." "Impossible," Krexoth snarled. "They are only 12 ships." "Sir, you need to see the tactical recordings. They're not fighting like any civilized species. They're using weapons designed purely to kill, and their movement patterns, it's like they've been studying our combat doctrine for centuries." On his tactical display, Krexoth watched another wave of his fighters die as a human ship. The UES Vengeance demonstrated yet another impossible technology. The ship seemed to simply vanish from sensors for several seconds, reappearing behind a formation of Devourer fighters and unleashing what looked like miniature suns. Cloaking technology, combined with fusion torpedoes. Admiral Roberts' voice cut into their communication. "War Harvester, you're down to about 4,000 fighters. At this rate, we'll have space superiority in about 20 minutes. "You will not," Krexoth roared. "All capital ships, target the human vessels. I want them reduced to atoms." The Bauer. Massive Devourer battleships began turning their primary weapons toward the human fleet. Each ship was over a kilometer long and carried enough firepower to sterilize a planet's surface. Zephyr On watched in horror as beams of coherent energy capable of boiling oceans lanced out toward the 12 human ships, and missed. Every single shot. "How?" she whispered. "Counselor," came a new voice. "Commander Jennifer Walsh of the UES Determination. You have to understand something about human space combat doctrine. We don't just prepare for fighting enemies who are bigger than us. We prepare for fighting enemies who are bigger, faster, stronger, and more numerous than us, because on Earth, that's usually the situation we find ourselves in." The human ships had spread out across a 3-dimensional area of space larger than Valthara Prime itself. They moved in patterns that seemed random, but somehow always kept them just outside the effective range of the Devourer capital ships while maintaining perfect firing solutions on the enemy fighters. "It's called the Mosquito Doctrine," Lieutenant Kim explained. "Be too small to hit effectively, too fast to track consistently, and annoying enough that the enemy makes mistakes." As if to demonstrate her point, one of the Devourer battleships, trying to swat the UES Vindictive, accidentally fired its main cannon through two of its own fighter squadrons. But the humans weren't content to simply avoid destruction. As the battle progressed, their tactics began to evolve in real time. All ships, this is Admiral Roberts. Execute Maneuver 7. Zephyr watched as the human fleet suddenly contracted, all 12 ships converging on a single point in space, directly above the largest Devourer battleship. For a moment, it looked like they were about to commit suicide by ramming the enemy vessel. Instead, they did something that made the laws of physics weep. All 12 ships fired simultaneously, not at the battleship, but at each other. Their weapons beams met at a precise point in space and somehow combined, creating a lance of energy that punched through the Devourer ship's shields like they were made of tissue paper. The kilometer-long battleship split in half, its massive bulk tumbling toward Valthera Prime's upper atmosphere where it would burn up harmlessly. Focused beam convergence, Dr. Vasquez explained, as though she was discussing the weather. We've been working on that one for a while. War Harvester Krexoth stared at his tactical display in something approaching panic. In less than 30 minutes, these 12 impossible ships had destroyed over half his fighter complement and one of his primary battleships. His remaining forces were scattered and demoralized. "This is impossible," he transmitted on all frequencies. "What kind of species builds weapons like these? What kind of civilization teaches its children to fight like this?" Admiral Roberts' reply was calm and factual. "The kind that evolved on a planet where the weather tries to kill you, the animals try to eat you, the plants are often poisonous, and the geological features have a habit of exploding without warning. War Harvester, your species made a fundamental error in judgment." "What error?" "You assumed that a peaceful species would be helpless, but you see, humans learned a long time ago that the only way to maintain peace is to be better at war than anyone else." On the surface of Valthera Prime, the Devourer ground forces had received new orders. Instead of systematically harvesting the population, they were now frantically setting up defensive positions and calling for immediate evacuation. Zephyr watched through the tower's sensors as the invaders who had seemed so terrifying just hours ago scrambled to load their equipment back onto their landing craft. "They're retreating," she said, hardly believing it. "Not quite yet," Admiral Roberts replied. "Krexoth, you still have ground forces on the surface. I strongly suggest you recall them immediately. And if I refuse, then we'll recall them for you." As if to emphasize the point, the UES Retribution broke away from the main human formation and began descending toward Valthera Prime's atmosphere. "What are you doing?" Krexoth demanded. "Close air support," Captain Santos replied. "It's a human specialty." The sleek human ship entered the planet's atmosphere like a falling star, its hull glowing with re-entry heat. As it approached the Devourer ground positions, it began broadcasting a message on all frequencies. "Attention, Devourer ground forces. This is Captain Maria Santos of the United Earthship Retribution. You have 60 seconds to board your transports and leave this world. Anyone still on the surface after that time will be considered a legitimate military target." Through her sensors, Zephyr watched the Devourer soldiers abandon their positions and sprint for their landing craft with desperate speed. 50 seconds, Captain Santos announced cheerfully. The evacuation became a rout. Soldiers threw down their weapons, abandoning heavy equipment in their haste to escape. Landing craft took off while still loading, their cargo bays half open. 40 seconds. War Harvester Krexoth's voice cut across all channels. All ground forces, immediate evacuation. All ships prepare for emergency jump to hyperspace. 30 seconds. The last Devourer transport lifted off from Valthera Prime's surface, leaving behind a scattered collection of abandoned equipment and several very relieved Valthari civilians. 10 seconds, Captain Santos said. "Oh, and War Harvester? If we ever detect Devourer ships in this system again, we won't bother with the countdown." The space around Valthera Prime filled with the distorted light of ships entering hyperspace as the entire Devourer fleet fled the system as quickly as their technology would allow. In the sudden silence that followed, Zephyr found herself staring at the tactical display showing 12 small human ships floating peacefully in orbit around her world. "Admiral Roberts," she said finally. How do we thank you?" "No thanks necessary, Counselor. We're happy to help." "But why? You risked everything to save a species you had never met, on a world you had never seen." There was a pause before Admiral Roberts replied, and when he did, his voice carried something that Zephyron was beginning to recognize as fundamentally human. "Counselor, 8 billion humans heard your distress call. 8 billion people learned that somewhere in the galaxy, a peaceful species was being threatened by bullies. Did you really think we wouldn't come?" 3 days after the battle, the first official diplomatic vessel from Earth arrived in the Velthera system. The ship was called the UES Harmony, and it was unlike any of the warships that had driven off the Devourers, where the military vessels had been sleek and predatory. The Harmony was clearly designed for a different purpose. Its hull was decorated with artistic representations of Earth's diverse cultures, and it broadcast music on multiple frequencies, everything from Beethoven to jazz to something the humans called K-pop. Zephyron met the human delegation in the Grand Assembly Hall, a crystalline dome that had somehow survived the brief Devourer occupation. She had spent the last 3 days trying to process everything that had happened, and she still felt as though she was living in some kind of fever dream. The human ambassador was a woman named Dr. Keiko Tanaka, and she was smaller than Zephyron had expected. After witnessing the fury of human warfare, she had somehow imagined all humans to be giants. Instead, Dr. Tanaka was barely as tall as a young Velthari, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "Hi, Counselor Zephyron," Dr. Tanaka said, performing what she explained was a traditional human greeting called a bow. "On behalf of the people of Earth, I want to express our honor at making first contact with your species." "Dr. Tanaka," Zephyron replied, still struggling with human pronunciation, "I must ask, are all humans warriors like Admiral Roberts and his fleet?" Dr. Tanaka laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Oh goodness, no. Admiral Roberts and his people are military specialists. Most humans are much more like me. Teachers, artists, scientists, engineers. We're generally a peaceful species." "Peaceful?" Zephyron couldn't hide her confusion. "But the battle we witnessed—" "Hi, Counselor, may I ask you a question?" Dr. Tanaka settled into a specially designed chair that accommodated her smaller human frame. "If someone threatened your children, what would you do?" Zephyron considered this. I would do anything necessary to protect them." "Exactly. Humans are the same way, except we tend to think of anyone who asks nicely for help as part of our extended family." Over the following hours, Dr. Tanaka explained human society in terms that slowly began to make sense to Zephyron. Humans, it seemed, were a species of contradictions. They were fiercely competitive among themselves but united instantly when facing external threats. They created art of incredible beauty, while simultaneously developing weapons of unimaginable destruction. They were capable of both startling cruelty and breathtaking kindness, sometimes within the same individual. "We're not a perfect species," Dr. Tanaka admitted. "We make mistakes, sometimes terrible ones, but we try to learn from them. And we've learned that the universe is much more interesting when it's full of different kinds of people." "Is that why you came to help us? Because the universe is more interesting with Velthari in it?" Dr. Tanaka smiled. "That's part of it. But mostly we came because you asked for help, and no one should have to face bullies alone." Their conversation was interrupted by Humara, who rushed into the assembly hall with 6 arms full of data tablets. "Hi, Counselor. We're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy." "What kind of transmissions?" "Messages of support from dozens of species. Apparently, news of the battle has spread throughout the galactic communication networks. Everyone knows that humans defeated the Devourer Syndicate." Dr. Tanaka looked concerned. "Everyone knows? That might be problematic." "Why?" Zephyron asked. "Well," Dr. Tanaka sighed, "humans have a bit of a reputation problem. Most species tend to be wary of us because we come from what they classify as a Class 12 death world. They assume we're all violent primitives. But you saved us. Yes. But we did it by destroying several hundred enemy ships and routing an entire invasion fleet. That's going to reinforce certain stereotypes. As if to prove her point, Hamara looked up from his data tablets with an expression of confusion. High Counselor, some of these messages are strange. The Rigelian Collective is offering to pay tribute to Earth. The Andorian Trade Federation wants to negotiate protection contracts, and the Centauri Republic is asking if humans are accepting applications for vassalage. Dr. Tanaka put her face in her hands. Oh, this is exactly what we were afraid of. I don't understand, Zephyron said. High Counselor, most galactic civilizations operate on a fairly simple principle. The strong dominate the weak. When they see a species capable of what we did 3 days ago, they assume we're looking to build an empire. But you're not? Absolutely not. Humans tried the empire thing several times in our history. It never ended well for anyone involved. Before Zephyron could respond, the chamber's communication system came alive with an incoming transmission. The holographic display showed a being she didn't recognize. Tall, thin, with silver skin and large black eyes. Greetings, the being said in accented Galactic standard. I am Ambassador Veltar of the Galactic Cooperation Council. I am requesting immediate contact with the representatives of the species known as humans. Dr. Tanaka stood up and bowed slightly. I am Dr. Keiko Tanaka, diplomatic representative of Earth. How may we help you, Ambassador? Veltar's large eyes seemed to focus on her with intensity. Dr. Tanaka, the Galactic Cooperation Council has been monitoring the situation in this system. We must discuss the implications of your species' actions. Of course, Dr. Tanaka replied diplomatically. We're always happy to engage in dialogue with galactic authorities. Dr. Tanaka, in the past 72 hours, your species has single-handedly defeated one of the most feared military forces in this galaxy. The Devourer Syndicate has terrorized peaceful worlds for over 2 centuries. Entire civilizations have fallen to their harvesting fleets. We are aware of their reputation, Doctor, Tanaka said carefully. Are you aware that no military force in recorded galactic history has ever successfully repelled a full Devourer invasion? The standard response to their arrival is immediate evacuation of the target world. Zephyron felt a chill run through her crystalline spine. Ambassador Veltar, are you saying that the attack on our world was unusual in some way? High Counselor, what happened here was unprecedented. 700 Devourer ships fled from 12 human vessels. This has never occurred before. Ever. Dr. Tanaka looked uncomfortable. Ambassador, if I may ask, what exactly does the Council want from us? Veltar was quiet for a long moment. Dr. Tanaka, the Galactic Cooperation Council exists to maintain peace and stability among member species. For this to work, there must be a certain balance of power. No single species can be allowed to dominate others. We have no interest in dominating anyone, Dr. Tanaka said firmly. Perhaps not. But Dr. Tanaka, your species has demonstrated military capabilities that exceed anything in our databases. This creates a problem. What kind of problem? The kind where other species begin to panic. As if summoned by his words, the communication system began receiving dozens of simultaneous incoming transmissions. Humara's arms flew over his controls as he tried to manage the flood of messages. High Counselor, he reported breathlessly. We're receiving communications from everyone. The Zephyrian Empire wants to know if humans are planning to invade their territory. The hegemony of worlds is mobilizing their defense fleets. The peaceful collective is offering to surrender preemptively. Dr. Tanaka sighed deeply. This is exactly what Earth Command was worried about. Your command expected this reaction? Zephyron asked. Dr. Tanaka, Ambassador Veltar interjected, I need to ask you directly, what are your species' intentions regarding galactic expansion? We don't have any, Dr. Tanaka replied honestly. Humans are still getting used to the idea that we're not alone in the universe. We're much more interested in exploration and cultural exchange than conquest. But you are prepared for war. We're prepared to defend ourselves and our friends. Yes, Dr. Tanaka, the distinction may be lost on species who have just watched you annihilate a devourer fleet. The conversation was interrupted by yet another incoming transmission. This time, the holographic display showed Admiral Roberts, broadcasting from the bridge of his flagship. Dr. Tanaka, we have a situation developing. Long-range sensors are detecting multiple fleets converging on the system. It looks like half the galaxy wants to get a closer look at us. How many ships are we talking about, Admiral? Current count is over 3,000 vessels from at least 40 different species. Most of them appear to be maintaining defensive formations, but Admiral Roberts paused. Doctor, some of these fleets are larger than anything we have in our databases. We might have a problem. Sapphiron felt her foreheart sink. 3 days ago, her world had been threatened by 700 devourer ships. Now, because humans had saved them, they were about to be visited by 3,000 ships from across the galaxy. Ambassador Feltar, she said, surely the Council can explain to these species that humans pose no threat to peaceful civilizations. High Counselor, the Council would be happy to do so. But first, we need to understand the humans ourselves. Dr. Tanaka looked from Ambassador Veltar to Admiral Roberts to Zephyr On and seemed to make a decision. Very well. Ambassador Admiral High Counselor, I think it's time for some full disclosure. May I tell you a story about human history? Over the next hour, Dr. Tanaka painted a picture of humanity that was both inspiring and terrifying. She spoke of a species that had clawed its way up from a hostile world, learning to cooperate despite their competitive instincts. She described wars that had nearly destroyed them, and the hard-won wisdom that had followed. The thing you have to understand, she concluded, is that humans learned early that the strong have a responsibility to protect the weak, not to rule them, but to ensure they have the chance to grow and flourish. That's a beautiful philosophy, Ambassador Veltar said. But philosophies can change. Not this one, Admiral Roberts interjected. Ambassador, every human child learns about something we call the bully test. If you see someone being picked on, you have two choices. You can walk away or you can step in. Humans who walk away aren't considered heroes. And you consider yourselves heroes? No, Dr. Tanaka said softly. We just consider ourselves neighbors. The philosophical discussion was interrupted by Humara, who had been monitoring the approaching fleets. High Counselor, we're receiving a transmission from the lead vessel of the largest approaching fleet. They're identifying themselves as the hegemony of world's primary battle group. The holographic display filled with the image of a being that looked like a cross between a reptile and an insect, wearing elaborate military regalia. I am Supreme Commander Zarthek of the Hegemony Primary Fleet. I demand to speak with the human military commander immediately. Admiral Roberts stepped forward. I'm Admiral Jackson Roberts, Earth Defense Fleet. What can I do for you, Commander? Admiral Roberts, the Hegemony of Worlds has monitored your recent actions against the Devourer Syndicate. We are impressed. The Hegemony wishes to discuss terms. Terms for what? Terms for Earth's integration into the Hegemony power structure. Your species clearly possesses superior military technology. The Hegemony is prepared to offer you significant autonomy in exchange for military cooperation. Admiral Roberts was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. Commander Zarthek, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. Earth is not seeking to join any existing power structure. Admiral, you may not have a choice. The galaxy has seen what your species is capable of. You cannot remain neutral. Watch us. The tension in the chamber was palpable. Zephyr On realized that humanity had just gone from unknown species to galactic power player in the span of 3 days, and they were clearly not comfortable with the transition. Commander, Dr. Tanaka interjected diplomatically. Perhaps we could discuss this further once the immediate situation here is resolved. The Valthari people have just survived an invasion, and their needs should be our primary concern. Supreme Commander Zarthek's reptilian features twisted into what might have been a sneer. The fate of one minor species is irrelevant to larger, galactic stability. The change in Admiral Roberts was immediate and visible. His posture shifted, and when he spoke, his voice carried the same iron edge that had cowed war harvester Krexoth. Commander, I'm going to say this once, and I suggest you listen carefully. No species under human protection is irrelevant. The Valthari asked for help, and we gave it. Anyone who has a problem with that is welcome to discuss it with my fleet. Admiral, you command 12 ships. I have over 400. Commander, 3 days ago, the Devourer Syndicate had 700 ships. How did that work out for them? The silence that followed was deafening. Supreme Commander Zarthek stared at Admiral Roberts for a long moment, then abruptly cut the transmission. Well, Dr. Tanaka said with forced cheerfulness, that went about as well as expected. Ambassador Veltar had been observing the exchange with obvious interest. Dr. Tanaka, Admiral Roberts, I believe I'm beginning to understand your species better. Oh? You're not empire builders, you're, how do humans put it, troublemakers. Admiral Roberts grinned. Ambassador, I think that might be the nicest thing anyone said about us all week. Into your epilogue, the Death Worlder Doctrine. 6 months later. High Counselor Zephyron stood in the newly constructed Human Cultural Exchange Center, watching a group of young Valthari students attempt to play something called basketball with their human teacher. The sight of her people laughing and competing in a game that would have been unthinkable before first contact still filled her with wonder. Counselor, Dr. Tanaka approached carrying a data pad filled with the daily reports that had become routine since Earth had established a permanent embassy on Valthara Prime. Dr. Tanaka, please, just Zephyr on. We've been through too much together for such formality. Very well, Zephyron. I have some interesting news from the Galactic Cooperation Council. Over the past 6 months, the galaxy had slowly adapted to the reality of human presence. It hadn't been a smooth process. 3 different species had attempted to test human resolve by attacking worlds that had requested Earth's protection. All 3 had retreated after brief but decisive encounters with human fleets. More importantly, word had spread about what humans actually wanted from their relationships with other species: trade, cultural exchange, and mutual defense agreements. No tribute, no vassalage, no forced integration into human society. What does the Council have to say? Zephyr asked. They're proposing something new. They want to formalize what they're calling the Death Worlder Doctrine, which is essentially official recognition that species from high classification worlds have both the right and responsibility to intervene when peaceful civilizations are threatened by aggressive expansion. Zephyr considered this. That sounds like they're trying to make humans into the galaxy's police force. That's exactly what they're trying to do. And Earth Command is trying to figure out how to politely decline. Why decline? Humans have proven they're effective at stopping aggressors. Dr. Tanaka sat down on one of the benches designed to accommodate both human and Valthari physiology. Zephyr there are over 10,000 inhabited worlds in this galaxy. If humanity becomes the official defenders of peaceful species, we'll be at war constantly. But you've proven that human military technology is superior to most galactic civilizations. Superior, yes, but not unlimited. We can't be everywhere at once, and every time we intervene somewhere, we make new enemies. Eventually, someone is going to figure out how to counter our advantages. Their conversation was interrupted by Admiral Roberts, who had just arrived from Earth with a new rotation of embassy staff. Dr. Tanaka, Counselor, we need to discuss the situation developing in the Kepler sector. What's happening in Kepler? Dr. Tanaka asked. 3 different species have requested human protection from the same aggressive neighbor. If we accept, we'll essentially be taking sides in a regional conflict that's been going on for decades. And if we refuse, those 3 species will probably be conquered within the year. Zephyr listened to the humans discuss their dilemma and realized something profound. 6 months ago, her species had been facing extinction, and these strange beings from a distant world had risked everything to save them. Now those same beings were struggling with the consequences of their own compassion. "Admiral Roberts," she said, "may I ask you something?" "Of course, Counselor." "When you received our distress call, did you hesitate? Did you consider the political implications or the strategic consequences?" Admiral Roberts was quiet for a moment. "No. We heard that peaceful people were in trouble, and we came to help. It was that simple." "Then why is this decision any different?" Dr. Tanaka and Admiral Roberts exchanged glances. "Because," Dr. Tanaka said slowly, "we're not sure we can keep being everyone's protector without eventually becoming everyone's ruler." "Dr. Tanaka, in the past 6 months, how many times have humans tried to interfere with Valthari internal affairs?" "Never." "How many times have you demanded tribute or resources in exchange for protection?" "Never." "How many times have you suggested that Valthari society should be more like human society?" "We've shared our perspectives when asked, but we've never demanded changes." Zephyron stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the rebuilt city where Valthari and human architecture now blended in ways that enhanced both styles. "Dr. Tanaka, Admiral Roberts, I think you're asking the wrong question." "What should we be asking?" "Not whether you can afford to help, but whether you can afford not to." Through the window, she could see the memorial that had been erected at the site where the first Devourer forces had landed. It was a joint human-Valthari design, honoring both the victims of the invasion and the humans who had died defending other worlds in the months since. "You see," Zephyron continued, "the galaxy has learned something important about humans. You don't help people because you expect something in return. You help because it's who you are. That's why species keep asking for your protection, not because they fear your strength, but because they trust your intentions." Admiral Roberts looked thoughtful. "Counselor, are you suggesting we accept the Council's proposal?" "I'm suggesting you do what humans always do. Listen to the call for help, and decide whether you can live with walking away." That evening, Zephyron received a message from Earth Command. Humanity had agreed to the Deathworlder doctrine, with one modification. Instead of Earth serving as the galaxy's sole protector, humans would work to identify and train other Deathworlder species. Civilizations from harsh environments who shared humanity's willingness to defend the weak. The message included a list of 12 species that had been identified as potential partners, including one that made Zephyron's 4 hearts skip a beat. At the bottom of the list, marked with a small notation about recent demonstration of protective instincts and tactical innovation, was a single entry: Valthari Prime. She looked out at her rebuilt city, where humans and Valthari worked together to create something neither species could have achieved alone, and smiled. The galaxy was about to become a much more interesting place. End of story.